Hey guys, it's Mike from Chess Lifestyle, and a very quick intro from me. But basically, I just finished teaching a chess lesson with one of my students, George, and he very kindly has offered to allow me to upload some of the lesson contents to the YouTube channel. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy and learn something from this middle game theme of infection. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it.
But Queen C7, the way you played it, to knock the queen out the way, get in C4, reroute your knight back. I mean, this is like the interesting thing about Benoni that a lot of players they just think it's a completely ultra sharp opening. But the fact is that it's still semi-open or semi-closed, depending how you see it, and that means there is space for maneuvering. So such knight B6, knight back to D7, it's completely fine and it's even good. So yeah, like we can afford to lose that time if we are achieving a particular goal with this maneuvering. So this is nice. And then you got in your B5, which is very great. And yeah, this position is just really good for black. Uh, but unfortunately, as the Benoni is still somewhat sharp, it
Hmm.
can also fall apart like a house of cards. And
Hmm.
that is where Rook B7 led to a complete collapse. And it turns out that Queen C8 is much better. And you'll see that I've added the note avoiding infection, which is the topic we'll come on to very briefly next.
Okay.
But Rook B7, unfortunately, your pieces get infected because now, your rook is pinned to the queen, which then allows knight takes b5, so you can't take.
Hmm.
And then, because you can't take, then your queen is infected, and you have to play queen c8, which then means the pawn is undefended, so that drops. And yeah,
Yeah, it just
then
collapses.
everything falls apart, right? So it turns out that yeah, in this position, had you just played Queen C8 to avoid that tension, this is
Hmm.
actually a much better position for Black. And I mean, the reason being is we have this 2v1 majority on the Queen side. Our knights have some very nice squares to aspire to. Our rooks are well placed. Our queen is out of the way. The queen is even well placed supporting c4. And white doesn't really have any tactical means to get in. Like the knight's not getting in, the bishop's not getting in, the pawn to e5 is not working. So yeah, black's just better in this position.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was a much simpler move. I should have looked at. Yeah.
yeah, but it all comes back to this infection point. Um, yeah, I want to share with you this game. And do I want to just show the infection part or make it a whole exercise? Let's make it a whole exercise. Why not? It's good
Yeah, why
practice.
not? We got
Yeah.
the time,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, why not? So, okay, this was a game of mine. I think this was maybe a rapid game that I played a while back. And yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I've got bishop and three pawns against rook, although the position is, a lot of tension all over the place. It looks a bit messy. I do get the move knight f5 in. So
Mhm.
if you were black, how would you actually handle this pressure?
Mhm.
What's the best way to resolve the situation?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's a check. There's 92 check.
Uh-huh.
92.
And for the record, yeah, maybe this is coming with experience, but for me, unless I see like an immediate fork or something, I guess you could pursue the checks and see if there's anything there. But what I've learned is that rook and knight are not a great tag team, and actually, the rook and knight often only have combinations when the knight is on this square, a diagonal away
Yeah,
from the corner. So
right.
when I get to this position in my head, where I'm looking here, looking for checks or some kind of mating net wouldn't be my ideal. I mean, looking for checks to see if there's a fork or to win a piece, that would be nice. But as soon as you see there's not that, what's the most critical move to consider at that moment?
Oh, I guess you've got pressure on D3, rook takes
Exactly.
D3 or takes D3.
Yeah. So one of these captures should be yeah, I mean
Hmm.
both should be looked at and we need to evaluate what happens in that situation. So um Okay, because we are a little bit tight for time, what does your instinct say? Do you think rook takes pawn is better chances to draw, or knight takes pawn is better chances to draw? So think about that for like a minute or two. Based on pure instinct, what would be your
Uh, well, okay, I've heard that, rook end games are drawn, so I would probably
uh-huh.
keep the rook.
Okay. So that statement, rook endgames are drawn, I want you to forget about it. Or not forget about it, but basically just remind yourself that this is advice for 2700s and we should scrap it in terms of
Yeah,
like our
no,
position.
I was just trying to answer your question, but okay,
Right,
I
right.
understand that. Okay,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. No, and I'm glad you mentioned that because it's a common misconception, at least at the lower level, that uh yeah,
Right.
people mention this a lot, and I think it's just really misleading because um
Hmm.
Rook end games swing a lot in terms of
Hmm.
their evaluation, and it's only at like the real, GM level where it's played at such high caliber that yeah, they do have a
Okay,
drawish tendency. But for us,
interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
I would recommend we avoid it. So um yeah, I would say that actually uh as an instinct to keep the rooks on, given that we're material down,
Hmm.
is probably correct. But if you are able to see that final position and visualize it well, you might pick up on one other thing, which is the fact that if you, take with the rook, sorry, if you take with the knight at the end to keep the rooks on, the thing is, um, ultimately, a rook and knight can be more tricky than a single piece on its own, right? So there's more possibilities, maybe chances for you to draw, maybe chances for your opponent to win. There's more outcomes.
Hmm.
However, if you were to um, take with the rook and get a rook trade, when you have this knight end game, despite being a pawn down, there's a factor about this knight end game, which means that black has much better drawing chances. So let's say the knight is now on d3, attacking the pawn. The only way to
Yep.
defend the pawn is to
Or
push it. And then
right.
the knight, let's say, can attack the pawn on c4. And let's say rather than push the pawns where the pawns are literally just going to get traded and then it's going to be a draw, let's say they try and defend.
Hmm.
You have that final position in your head still?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Knight on
Okay.
e5. Hmm.
Yep. In that position, what principle can we identify which means that it's most likely, we can't say for certainty, but most likely going to be a draw?
Um, I guess if we figure out a way for so there are only two pawns for white. If we can sack the knight for we can win one of the pawns and then we can sack the knight for the other one.
Okay, and how would we win one of the pawns?
Uh, get the king to c5
Yes,
and
get the
then
king involved. And when you
mhm,
look at the respective kings, yeah, how many squares does it take to get to the action for black? Well, as you said, c5, so 1, 2, 3 squares it takes,
mhm,
3 turns. And for
yeah.
white to get into the action,
Looks
it
like
takes a lot more.
yeah, right, because the knight is kind of getting in the way of the
Also, the knight
king
is
on
covering
e3.
this square, so it's going to be a bit awkward to get over
Yeah,
as
and the white
fast.
knight is on e3, so it can't go like
Exactly.
f2 e3.
Yeah, both these squares are blocked. So, um, of course, yeah, this would require accurate calculation to be certain that this is the case. But yeah, as soon as you can see the black king is actually able to get more active than the white king, well then,
Mhm,
yeah, as we'll soon find out, yeah, king activity is an extremely important factor in endgames, and yeah, the position would peter out to a draw. So
mhm.
okay, this was a bit of a sidetrack from the infection topic, but okay, still good to,
Okay.
to look into. So,
Yeah, that was
my opponent,
practice.
yeah, and my opponent in this position, rather than play rook h3, which is by far the best option, my opponent took on g4, which is just a much, much worse move because, yeah, I just, I probably could take either rook, but taking this rook is probably even better because now I simply keep 3 pawns. advantage. That's a lot better than one.
Yep, and like a strong outside pass pawn too. Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, my question then is, okay, the complication subsides, and I remember we had one lesson during our Benoni lessons where I mentioned this topic of schematic thinking, where
Hmm.
when you get a new phase of the game, like some complications have just resolved themselves like this, and we reach a new
Hmm.
position. This is the time to stop and think and appreciate that this is a critical position, and come up with your plan, your opponent's plan, and what trades do we want. So, what is your schematic thinking in this position?
Well, ideally, you could trade everything, all the
Hmm.
pieces, and
What about the
just
individual traits?
individual trades.
So would this position be better versus this position with just rooks or this position with just knights?
Mhm. Intuitively, I think it would be better with just knights,
Hmm.
because a knight is a slow piece, and it takes time for it to get from one side of the board to the other.
Yeah. If you've got two
So,
separate passed pawns, the knight definitely
mhm,
struggles to deal with the demands of the position. Yeah.
mhm.
And what about just rooks?
Just rooks should also be good for white, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if it was a case of bishop and rook against bishop and rook, and our bishop and rook could coordinate better than their bishop and rook, then that might be a reason to keep the bishop and rook on because they're a very strong tag team. But
Mhm,
rook and knight is not a very strong tag team, and I think it's only going to lead to black having some swindling chances
mhm,
if the knights stay on. So I would definitely like to trade. So okay, that's the trading uh, crystal clear.
mhm.
What about the plan? How does white actually go about winning this? What's the main plan?
Yeah. Mm. Hmm.
And just for the record, when I show this to some of my other students, a lot of them say that their main plan would be to trade. But of course, in such an open position, it's very difficult to force a trade. So that shouldn't be
Mhm.
your plan. Like it should be something you keep in the back of your mind if the opportunity
Yeah.
arises, but it should never be like that's like where your direction of play is heading. It's
Yeah. I think my goal
yeah,
would be to just drawing on some of the lessons that we've had, to try to activate all of my pieces. So
good. Yeah.
right now the rook is somewhat passive, just defending d4. So I would like to figure out something I could do with that. So either move the pawn somewhere, or first make the knight defend it, then find a way to get the rook active. Second, looks like the king is cut off on the G file, so try to
Uh-huh.
do something like that, get the king involved, and
Hmm.
then hopefully keep all the pawns defended, and then start slowly pushing everything up the board.
Okay, so I like the fact that you mentioned the king is cut off and you want to do something about it. That's very important. Yeah, without
Mm,
an active king, this position will not be won. So that's something to work out. But there's something you mentioned about the activity of the rook, which I definitely want to sort out now, which is
mhm.
rook activity does not look the same as perhaps in a middle game where typically you'd want the rook to be like attacking or entering or something like this. I mean, in an end game, an active rook is basically a rook with a plan. And I mean, maybe that's the
Yeah.
same with middle games, but middle games is more often where the rook is just attacking. And I guess in end games it's often attacking as well. But in fact, the rook is actually perfectly placed for this end game. It's not
That's a good
passive.
point.
It's
Yeah,
actually yeah.
it's supporting that pass pawn, and yeah,
Yes.
I'm just starting to see like the black will have to direct all their attention to stopping it.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, yeah, often, we want to put the rook on the open file. We don't want the rook defending, right? But when you realize that actually the d pawn pushing is your most promising advantage in the position and you want to make use
Mhm.
of it, then the rook is actually perfectly placed. So yeah, that's why I mean this position requires a long, deep think, and you should, if you get this in a classical game, you should spend the
Mhm.
time and not play it in 5 minutes or something, like spend 15 minutes and if you have the
Mhm.
time to really understand as much as you can about the end game
Mhm.
before making your next steps. So, okay, of course, this was a rapid game. I didn't have as much time, but yeah, somehow I had a good feeling for this position, and I identified that, yeah, I want to get my king active, and by active, I want my king on e5 because my plan is to push my d pawn and push these together and make a queen.
Mhm.
So this was my plan. And I mean, when you look at Black's plan, Black doesn't really have a plan. I mean, Black's plan is basically to try and pick off your pawns and stop your plan. But
Mhm.
it's not very fun for Black to play like this.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
okay, I start with d4, following the plan. My opponent hits my loose knight. I play knight g4, which is where I wanted my knight anyway. And I do remember in the game that I had anticipated the move rook h8 to try and pick up the h pawn. And I saw here a nice little tactic in order to avoid losing the h pawn. So white to play. How can we avoid losing the h pawn here?
Uh, First thought is king g3.
Hmm.
If rook h3, king takes f4. If
Hmm.
knight h3, maybe there's rook h1 to pin the knight.
Perfect. Yep, that's literally it. So king g3, knight h1 would be a game winner. So, and yeah, rook takes obviously the knight. So knight
Mhm.
h5 was played. King f3, rook f8, king e4, knight g3, king e5. So when we compare this position compared to like 5 moves ago, this is an absolute, yeah, win for me in terms of how the
Mhm.
position is heading. Like I've achieved my goal of a king, I've got my pawn one step closer, so this is looking really good. Now, my opponent plays rook h8, and again, for the purposes of time, I want to hear your instinct in this position. So, what would be your instinct in this position, white to play?
Mhm. Instinct. I think my instinct would be just to push d5.
Good. Okay, so I'm very happy to hear this. D5 is the best move in the position because
Mhm.
we are following the scheme that we put the hard work into understanding, and the scheme will decide. Who cares if we lose this H pawn? We're going to push, bring the king up. Okay, I mean, if they try and block with the king, yeah, this little circles will help. What is the winning move for white?
See rook a1.
Rook A1. Yep, just back rank threat. So if they try
Mhm.
and bring the knight back, well, then we bring the knight back as well. Continue to advance the king, and yeah, black already has to sacrifice the knight, which of course is a technically winning position for white.
Mhm.
So this is exactly where the game should have gone had we followed the scheme of the position, right? But in this position, I fell prey to one of the comments you made at the start as well, which was try and keep hold of all the pawns.
Mhm.
It's a very natural kind of instinct, I think. But this is the start of my problems. I play knight
Yeah.
f2.
Mhm.
And the thing is, uh, what we can understand is that this pawn in this situation is actually a weakness, right? It's a weak pawn that needs some protection. So
Mhm.
knight f2 is played, but as a result of this weakness, now the knight has become weak because now it's in a passive spot defending the
Mhm.
pawn. Now my
Mhm.
opponent played move rook f8, and here I should have just gone back knight g4, and then played d5, and then I'd be winning, right? But of course, at this moment, I didn't realize that my position had any issues, right? So
Mhm.
okay, my knight had a function defending this pawn. I don't really want to move my knight, otherwise he'll just go back. So I play rook d2. But now my pawn, which was defended by my knight and had to go passive, has now caused my
Mhm.
rook to defend the knight and go passive.
Right.
And this is a different kind of passive defending compared to the passive, I mean, the defending we were talking about earlier, right? Like, this rook is not passively defending, this is supporting a very active plan. Whereas,
Mhm.
this is passively defending this knight.
Mhm.
And yeah, in this position, my opponent finds a very annoying move, knight f1. So okay, I
Right.
have to move my rook somewhere. I've got to keep my rook on the second file, otherwise I lose my knight. So again,
Yeah.
instinctively, where would you put the rook?
Okay, this one's a little bit tougher. I would instinctively, I would probably put it either on like A2, just as far away from the knight as possible.
Uh-huh. Makes
I hate
sense.
knight fork. Yeah, and then or I would consider maybe E2,
Okay.
but yeah.
Okay, make a decision in 5 seconds. What are you gonna
Okay,
play?
I'm just gonna say rook A1
Okay, rook a2. Yeah. So
or
I'm
A2
glad
A2.
that when put on the spot, you make the
Yeah.
decision to play rook a2, which you felt was the safer move. And when you're dealing with like tricky knights, absolutely playing the safer move is the way to go.
Hmm.
So rook a2 would have been a decent move here. Rook e2, you're going to see why that's actually a bigger problem, but we'll come back to this. But my logic went like this. Rook c2 or rook e2. Rook e2 gets hit by the knight. Rook c2
Yep.
gets hit by the knight. So I want to move my rook somewhere. And I felt that I don't see a difference between these two moves. Uh, Rook b2, maybe a bit of extra support for my pawn. I don't know. Just made a move. Rook b2.
Hmm.
But it turns out that the rook on b2 does have an issue, which is the fact that black can play knight e3, threatening
Mm.
a fork.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And the more I look at this position, the more I realize and the more frustrated I get. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't even deal with this in a good way because I can't protect the pawn. And my rook is still
Hmm.
tied to the defense of this knight. So this is awful. So at this moment, I thought, well, okay, I've had enough of this knight. I'm going to play king e6. So when the knight takes the pawn, my king is a diagonal away from this knight. Do you know this rule?
Yes, it takes four, maybe three moves to get to check the king.
Yeah, 3 moves to get checked for king, 4 moves to
Yeah.
take a piece on that square. But yeah,
Yeah.
just takes many moves to achieve. And
Hmm.
by the same logic, I was like, well, now that my king is far away from the knight, I'm going to put my rook far away from the
Uh-oh.
knight. And yeah, what's the move?
Rookie eight.
Rook e8.
Rookie eight.
And actually, that's the same move that would have cost you the game had you played rook e2 here, right?
Oh,
Not to do with knight
yes.
e3. Rook e8 is also just game winner.
Yes.
So yeah, I blundered this, and then the worst, the literal worst part of this is that it's not even just blundering the rook, it's just completely blundering the game because if I counterattack their knight, the problem is they take attacking my knight. So I don't
Right.
even get to play king and knight and a bunch of pawns against a rook, which I would probably grind to the bitter end. And knowing how infuriated I would be about losing this position, I would maybe even flag the guy or something. But
Hmm.
yeah, okay. Even I have my limits. I keep the knight, but okay, it's not enough, and I fight it on. But yeah, I mean, the guy plays it well. He picks up all my pawns and even ends up checkmating me like this,
Oof.
which
Okay.
hurts. But okay, I'm glad at least I fought it on. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, brutal game, especially
Hmm.
given we went from this complication to this clarification,
Hmm.
then coming up with this whole plan of pushing the d pawn and activating the king for the whole position to collapse when I am 3 pawns up. It's
Hmm.
really, really remarkable. But when you click on the engine and you try and understand this, the engine doesn't tell you anything about this position. And the
Hmm.
only reason why I've gotten to the bottom of how on earth I lost this position, I mean, the engine will just say, oh, stupid, stupid white blundered rookie two, right?
Hmm.
But the
Right.
problems started way, way back all the way at this moment of knight f2. Everything was going perfectly until this move.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic is this topic called infection. The
Mm-hmm.
pawn is weak. It infects the knight, which then becomes weak, which infects the rook, which becomes weak, which infects the c-pawn, which becomes weak, which infects the king and rook's position, which becomes weak, which infects the rook to a point where I lose the rook. So this concept of weaknesses actually spreading like an infection is written about in Jan Marcus's Under the Surface book.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a very, very good topic to consider. I mean, I think Jan Marcus's examples he gives, I mean, they're a bit too convoluted and high level. I think like this example, for instance, is very, very clear that, yeah, there is this case of infection in chess. But yeah, when I saw your game, it was the exact first thought that came to my head. Rook b7 simply adds unnecessary tension to the position, which then weakens this,
Right.
which then weakens this, which then weakens this.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
where you can,
That leads to several blunders in a row. Yeah.
yeah, but it's not like the blunders. It's not like these moves are stupid, right? It wasn't like Queen C8 was a stupid move or Queen B8 was a stupid move. These are reasonable moves that lose because of previous infection. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. But the other thing as well is just when you get to this position here, you make sure that you follow the scheme that you had in mind. You
Mm-hmm.
don't start playing moves like knight f2, which are against the scheme, right? Your scheme never involved this h-pawn. If it never involved the
Mm-hmm.
h-pawn, who cares if they take it?
Yeah, the rook will have to spend time coming back to the eighth rank.
Exactly. Time to take the pawn, time to come back. And in the meantime, we've already gone ahead with our plan and won the game.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very, very interesting topic there. Yeah, I thought I should cover this one.
And that is my lesson for you on infection. So if you enjoyed that lesson, please do consider giving a like and commenting your thoughts down below. Would really appreciate it. And if you would like to see the full lesson uploaded, because funnily enough, I mean, the lesson was actually focused on pawn endgame strategy. And all of my insights there. And yeah, this topic of infection only came up because it happened to come up in one of the games that George wanted me to analyze. So if you would like to see the full lesson on pawn endgame strategy, definitely let me know in the comments below, and maybe I will consider uploading it as well. Probably if I do, it would be for YouTube members only, because I am trying to make a push for this. We have like maybe 3 or 4 members right now, but it would be really great if we could grow that community. So yeah, let me know, and thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Okay, bye.